The third time he abandoned me for the heroine, I decided to detach from this world and watch him head towards death with indifference. In the third cycle of trying to win over Shunbai, he once again deserted me, sacrificing his life for Xiaoyu. The system asked me, would you like to start the fourth cycle to continue saving the second male lead from the fate of dying for the heroine? Before this, I had worked hard for 12 years to complete the task. Despite all the injuries I suffered, Shunbai would hysterically tell me before dying in each cycle, stay out of my business. If you stop me from saving you, I will hate you for life. This time, I shook my head. I'm tired. I won't take this task anymore. Acknowledged, detachment from the program will occur in 10 days. During these 10 days, I engaged in complete decluttering, no longer caring where Shunbai went. I let him continue indulging in the heroine's embrace, saying these 10 days without my interference were his happiest times. But on the day of departure, when Shunbai saw the house I had emptied, he was stunned. For the first time, his face turned ashen, and he trembled as he asked me, Sway, where are you going? Are you going to abandon me? If you leave, what am I supposed to do? Young man, you're already setting up a stall at such a young age. Nowadays, people face so much academic pressure that starting work early seems normal. This was Shunbai's second day of getting up early to sell jianbingguizi at a street stall. He was too young, and compared to the elderly men and women around him, he seemed completely out of place in the crowd. It was only his second day, and some were already speculating that he was just another young person who couldn't cope with school and ended up trying to make a living. But what they didn't know was that Shunbai left school by choice. He did it for the heroine, Xiaoyu. After breaking up with the male lead, Chenze, the heroine discovered she was pregnant and was determined to give birth to the child. But she had no money to live on and didn't want to find a job. So Shunbai stepped in for her. He gave up his reserve spot for postgraduate medical studies and dropped out to set up a stall and earn money. He showed no regret for the countless hardships he endured during 4 years of medical school. Host, the third round mission has failed again. The system sighed regretfully in my ear. According to the plot's progression, 10 days from now, the second male lead, Shunbai, will be stabbed to death in front of his stall by some troublemaking thugs. Would you like to immediately begin the fourth cycle? The mission failed again. I have been reincarnated in this world for 3 cycles, each lasting 4 years. 12 entire years, and I still haven't been able to change the fate of the second male lead dying for the female lead. After a moment of silence, I looked at Shunbai in the distance, his face flushed red as he apologized to an impatient customer. I'm sorry, it's my first time running a stall. I'm a bit slow, sorry for keeping you waiting. My wife is pregnant, and that's why I came out to work. Life is tough, so please give us your support. I lowered my head and glanced at my hands, which were now rough and mottled. These hands have been making jianbingguizi, Chinese pancakes, for 4 long years. In the biting cold, day after day, waking early and working late, I supported him through 4 years of university. Yet now, all I've received in return is a decisive withdrawal letter from school. I still remember the year he first went to college. I brought him a meal at the campus gate and overheard his friends teasing him. Hey, how did a top student like you end up with a girlfriend who only has a high school diploma? What a waste. Just a stinky pancake seller. They only see that I'm just a woman running a stall who got incredibly lucky to find such a well-educated and considerate boyfriend. They don't see me toiling away behind the scenes to earn money to support his education and living expenses. But now, Shunbai dropped out without hesitation, turning all my sincere efforts over the past 4 years into a clown's act, making a mockery of me. Knowing that all expenses for 4 years came from my pancake sales, he now wants to emulate my actions to earn money for the female lead. I feel like laughing a bit. Host, let me go home. I'm not taking this task. A cold mechanical voice resounded. Acknowledged, the program is running. The host will be detached on the day of the male lead's death in 10 days. Just as it was being said, I looked up and suddenly locked eyes with Shunbai. The surrounding crowd was still praising the young man for being responsible and considerate towards his wife, and he hesitated for a moment before hurriedly removing his apron and running towards me. Honey, let me explain. There are too many people around, it's hard to explain, so I had to say Yia is my wife for now. I didn't mean to. I smiled and cut him off. It's okay. This time, his voice unexpectedly caught in his throat. After a long silence, he finally uttered the next sentence. Honey, I'm glad you understand me. I watched his figure as he hurried back to the pancake stall and suddenly felt a bit like laughing. In his world, the 4 years of hard work we shared couldn't compare to the female lead and someone else's child. So, this is called understanding him. At noon, he went to deliver food to Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu had moved out of the university dormitory due to her pregnancy and was living in a small apartment off campus. The rent was also paid by Shinbai. After carefully packing the nutritious meal box, he turned around and saw me eating dry, steamed buns. Perhaps feeling guilty, he uncharacteristically spoke up. Yaya is pregnant and needs more nutrition. Honey, don't worry. Once she gives birth, I promise you won't have to eat this kind of food anymore. Originally, our lives didn't have to be this financially strained. But Shunbai chose a high-end apartment for Xiaoyu. The monthly rent, along with utilities and maintenance fees, has long made it unaffordable. Actually, I understand. The second male lead has admired the female lead since high school, and only in their senior year did he finally have the opportunity to take care of her. He gave his whole heart to Xiaoyu, so naturally, he would save on my behalf. In his heart, Xiaoyu comes first, he himself second, and I come last. I suddenly felt a bit like slapping myself to death. This damn task, I've actually persisted through 3 complete cycles. Wasted a full 12 years of youth before finally realizing. But fortunately, I've come to terms with it. No need. The expenses for a newborn will be greater than for a pregnant woman. You should save more money and prepare for the future. After speaking, I put down the dry, hard-steamed bun and turned back to the room. This time, Shunbai stood there dumbfounded, looking at me in disbelief. Afraid that his white moonlight might go hungry, Shunbai hurried out anyway. However, on the way, I received a text message from him. Honey, are you blaming me? Blame him? No, I only blame myself now. For wasting so much time before finally conceding to the mission. In the first round, he, the heroine, and I got into the same medical university. The heroine had poor grades and was taken advantage of by a supervisor. Shunbai was outraged and decided to take me to seek revenge. Unexpectedly, the supervisor was a maniac and took me and Xiaoyu as hostages with a knife. Without a second thought, Shunbai rushed to save Xiaoyu. In the chaos, my arm was slashed, and he was stabbed in the heart. The second male lead died, the mission failed, and I started the second round. In the second round, I again became university classmates with them. In our senior year, the heroine was just 1 mark short of retaining her postgraduate recommendation. Shunbai knelt and begged me to forgo my spot for her. I asked him why he couldn't, and his explanation was that he wanted to continue taking care of Xiaoyu during grad school. In the end, I didn't agree, and in his anger, he drank a lot and went out. He got into a car accident at a crossroads at night and died on the spot. I asked the system why each death was always so coincidental. The system told me that as long as the second male lead's heart belonged to the heroine, he could not escape the fate of dying for her. So in the third loop, I gave up studying and worked for 4 years hoping he would see my sacrifice. But no. I know. All along, I've been nothing more than a clown who exposed her true feelings over the years. The text messages kept beeping. Honey, Yaya's health can't wait. Last time I delivered food late, she felt so faint from hunger that she almost ended up in the hospital. A life is at stake. I can't help but worry. When she's further along, there will be even more expenses. Honey, why don't you consider joining me in setting up a stall again? I closed my eyes, turned off my phone, and didn't reply. Until the day he dropped out, I had a huge fight with him and stopped running my stall as well. I earned money, so he could have a better future. But now, he actually wants me to continue sacrificing for an unrelated woman? I called out the system. If the mission fails, will another book transcender come to change the second male lead's fate? A mechanical voice sounded coldly. No. If the host does not activate the 4th cycle, the world will freeze, and the second male lead will die permanently in 10 days. Great. There was a strange, bittersweet satisfaction in my heart. Wasn't he so eager to die for the female lead? Then, we shall never meet again. It wasn't until that evening that Shunbai finally returned. But he came back while supporting Xiaoyu, whose belly was noticeably swollen. I frowned tightly, looking at the bandages on Shunbai's arm. Before I could say anything, Xiaoyu rushed over with tearful eyes. Suijia, it's all my fault. I'm to blame. Accidentally set the oil pan on fire, and he got hurt protecting me. I took a closer look and saw the exposed flesh near Shunbai's bandages, charred and blackened. This is the hand of someone trained in medicine. If it were before, I would have cried for an entire night out of heartbreak. But now, I merely uttered a plain, "Oh." Wife. Shunbai looked at me nervously. There was a fire at Yu's place. Can she stay with us for a few days? Just a few days until the apartment is fixed. I will immediately. His tone was cautious, as if afraid I would get angry. After all, I used to have many arguments with him because of Xiaoyu. But this time, I interrupted him. Okay. Shunbai was stunned once more. He opened his mouth, just about to say something, but a voice behind him interrupted. Oh, Sister Sui Sui is really understanding this time, isn't she? Xiao Yu tugged Shunbai's sleeve. How could she be as unreasonable as you said she was in private? She pretended to glare at Shunbai, then turned her head. Sister Sui Sui, thank you so much. When you two get married, I'll make sure he treats you well. If you ever feel wronged, make sure to tell me. He wouldn't dare go against my words. With that, she gave me a sweet smile. I looked back at her with a blank expression. Even though I have already gone through this scenario 3 times, I still find myself unable to face the overwhelming vibe she exudes. A surge of deep-seated disgust rose from within me. I gave a cold laugh, ignored them, and went back to my room to continue packing my belongings. No matter what, I'll be leaving in 10 days. In these 10 days, I'll return everything that belongs to this world. And as a bonus, I'll celebrate the fact that I'll never have to see that perfect couple again. Shunbai hurried toward me. Honey, why are you packing your things? He seemed a little flustered, probably thinking I was upset with him again. I already told you in a few days, I'll send Ia back to her place. But before he could finish, a loud slam of a door came from the living room. Xiao Yu was angry. I knew exactly what she was mad about. In the previous 2 loops, something similar had happened. It was simply because Shunbai had called me honey in front of her. So, she was furious. I chuckled softly and silently counted to 2 in my head. Sure enough, 2 seconds later, Shunbai realized what was going on, panicked, and hurriedly left the room. While running, he kept shouting Yu.
Huh, see?
No matter when, his first choice is never me. When the world finally quieted down, I dialed the landlord's number. Hello. I steadied my emotions and looked around, surveying the small home Shunbai and I had lived in for 4 years. I won't be renewing next month. Xiao Yu still moved in with me. In the center of the living room, the couple's photo of Shunbai and me was replaced with her solo artistic portrait. The cabinet I bought myself was covered with cartoon stickers she liked. Even my favorite corner of the balcony was transformed into Xiao Yu's little study. I watched him busily work like watching a circus performance. After tidying up, he spent a significant amount of money again. Every day, after preparing a carefully curated menu for Xiao Yu, he was left to eat leftovers. I saw it all with my own eyes. Yet, I didn't subsidize him with a penny. It's quite all right. In this house, her things keep increasing, so he won't notice that my things are gradually decreasing. Nor will he realize that his life is counting down. Shunbai, go to hell. With a good attitude, I leave early and return late day after day. Having saved up a small amount of money from previous street vending, I plan to spend it all in these 10 days. If the money isn't spent, I don't want to leave it for them. When there were 7 days left on the countdown, I ran into Shunbai outside a high-end restaurant. He was briefly stunned, his face somewhat unpleasant, but he forced a smile nonetheless. Wife, you've been away from home these past 2 days. Is this the kind of place you've been coming to? I walked straight past without responding. He was clearly taken aback for a moment, then quick. Ly caught up to me. I've been busy tidying up the house these days and haven't had the chance to spend time with you. He took my hand, his tone turning gentle. Does my wife like this restaurant? When we have money, I'll accompany you here every day. Looking at his face, I felt like laughing a bit inside. I vividly remember in the year we were poorest, he had just started university and my business was not doing well. I am busy running around for a living, haggling with vegetable vendors over a dime, while he takes Xiao Yu to this restaurant with his savings. I can't afford to eat, yet he has a beauty in his arms. But Sui Sui, we are a bit tight on money these days. You know, the expenses for a pregnant woman are high, and she has been pampered since childhood. She can't endure hardships. Can we indulge ourselves once this period is over? He looked at me sincerely. Thanks to him, I was suddenly pulled away from memories filled with grievances. I nodded. This restaurant is indeed delicious. Then I withdrew my hand from his grasp. I will come more often to savor it. Shunbai was suddenly stunned. He looked at me in disbelief, opened his mouth to speak several times, but ultimately fell silent. After a moment of stalemate, he raised his arm again to show me the burn marks on his wrist. Honey, I got these burns while making pancakes to earn money. It's been many days already, haven't you noticed? He probably thinks I'll feel sorry for him, as I always have. But what does that have to do with me? He makes pancakes and earns money, not for me. I scoffed and rolled up my sleeve for him to see. There are a few old scars from severe burns that still remain. Shunbai, have you forgotten that I've endured far more in this line of work than you have? Yes, I started making a living from a street stall at 18. Entering society so young, the hardships I suffered are too painful to recall. Yet he has burned away 4 years of my hard work, so how can he expect me to sympathize with him now? Sure enough, the next second his face went pale. Honey, I knew it, you're still mad. What can I do to calm you? Being angry is bad for your health. But before he finished speaking, the phone suddenly rang. His phone is always on speaker, so the moment he picked up, I heard the voice on the other end clearly. Brother Shinbai, there seems to be a mouse in the house. I'm so scared. Can you come back and stay with me? I smiled. Coincidentally, my ride-sharing car arrived at that moment. Go on, don't make her worry. I no longer needed him, anyway. I opened the car door, sat down and waved at him. As expected, he didn't hesitate for even 2 seconds. Shunbai, who had just been apologizing to me, immediately turned back and got on his bicycle, heading home. He was riding too fast and didn't see what he hit, suddenly Alling to the ground. The system's voice chimed in right on time. Countdown to the second male lead's death. 7 days. During this period, due to the influence of the death deadline, it's a reasonable occurrence for the second male lead to have an increased rate of accidents. Please don't worry, host. Of course, I wouldn't worry. I didn't want to be involved with Shunbai anymore. While he's busy going home to take care of his white moonlight, I'll be enjoying the vibrant nightlife of this city. Though sometimes when I return, I can see Xiaoyu pouting, wanting him to feed her. At night when sleeping, he would be called away by a nightmare text from Xiaoyu and wouldn't return all night. I have lost count of how many times I've faced Xiaoyu's particularly provocative gaze. But I no longer want to care. I just keep tearing off the calendar days, silently counting down in my heart. 7 days, 6 days, 5 days. It's been many days since I last spoke to Shinbai. He hasn't talked to me either. Perhaps he is also sulking at me. After all, this is our first long-lasting Cold War. He wants to wait for me to cave first. But until the 3rd day of the countdown, Xiaoyu, in front of me, rushed into his arms and kissed him on the cheek.
I turned a blind eye.
Shunbai finally panicked. For the first time, he actively pushed Xiaoyu away and trapped me in the room. Jiang Sui, what do you mean by this? Do you have to be like this? What did I do wrong? What on earth did I do that was so heinous for you to treat me like this? I coldly shook off his hand. He's the one who destroys his future for someone else, and he's the one who gets close with someone else. Without love, even speaking another word to him feels like I'm embarrassing myself. Right now, I just want to quietly get through these last 3 days. But before I could get my wish, Xiaoyu came looking for trouble with me first. And the reason was still about that kiss. On the second to last day, just as I stepped out of the house, I received a call from Xiaoyu. She told me that something seemed to be missing from the house, and neither Shinbai nor I were home. Sui Jia, I know you installed a surveillance camera in the living room, but I don't know how to use it. Can you help me out? I had no choice but to go back. But as soon as I returned and turned on the surveillance footage, what greeted me was a scene from yesterday, her and Shinbai being intimate on the living room sofa. She was curled up in Shinbai's arms, pouting and asking him to feed her. Brother Shinbai, has Sui Jia been giving you the cold shoulder these past 2 days? Is it because of me? I should go apologize to her. At the mention of me, Shinbai's movements visibly stiffened. His tone was a bit cold. No need. It's better if she doesn't care about me. Without he are constantly keeping tabs on me, I've been quite happy these days. I turned off the screen expressionlessly and looked at Xiaoyu, who had been smiling all along. So, you actually know how to adjust the surveillance footage? Showing me this on purpose, do you find it amusing? Xiaoyu blinked. Now that it was just the two of us, she dropped the pretense and gradually withdrew her smile. In its place was undisguised provocation. Jiang Sui, it's been 4 years, and you still haven't won his heart. Sorry, but he's mine now. After all, she said, stroking her slightly rounded belly, I wouldn't want to raise a child on my own. I let out a cold chuckle, too lazy to argue with her, and grabbed my coat to leave. As if by coincidence, the door lock turned at that exact moment. It must be Shunbai returning. But just as I was about to head out, the next second, a sudden force yanked me back violently. A knife was pressed against my neck. Guess, she sneered. Will he believe you or me? I froze for a moment, stunned. Xiaoyu, are you insane? I shouted angrily. Put the knife down. But she didn't listen at all. Instead, she pressed harder, the blade piercing into my skin. Blood has already stained the tip of the knife. Yesterday, when I kissed him, he ran to find you. You must feel proud, right? Her voice suddenly became somewhat agitated. Bitch, Today I'll show you who he really cares about. The door lock clicked. Shunbai rushed in nervously. Did you lose something? But the next second, he stood there, seeing me and her lying on the ground, and a bloodstained knife on the floor. Brother Shunbai. Her expression changed in an instant, as she rushed over with tears in her eyes. I was wrong, Brother Shunbai. I don't dare to stay here any longer. My stomach hurts so much. Save me, Brother Shunbai. I gently released the hand covering my wound. In that instant when my eyes met Shunbai's, I suddenly found it somewhat amusing. Shunbai. I spoke softly. The blood on that knife is mine. It's me who is bleeding. For a moment, I hoped he could tell what was most urgent. I believed that even if it wasn't a lover, just any normal person would realize that my situation was more critical. But Shunbai didn't. He frantically called 120, informing them that there was a pregnant woman at home suddenly experiencing stomach pain. Then he anxiously held Xiaoyu in his arms. Yeah, what on earth happened? I'm sorry. I accidentally switched the surveillance, and Sister Sui got angry. Shunbai glanced at the surveillance. When he looked at me again, his eyes turned even colder. Jiang Sui, is it fun? How many times have I told you once the apartment is built, I'll send her back? How can you be so vicious, targeting a pregnant woman? Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I covered the bleeding wound, silently reciting in my heart. System, am I in danger? The mechanical voice continued to echo. Host, please rest assured, you do not belong to this world, so naturally there will be no life threat. That's good. I closed my eyes in self-mockery, finally throwing out a few words. Shunbai, she'll be fine, and I will be fine too. The one who's about to die is you. 2 days left. If you die, I'll be very happy. After saying this, the atmosphere fell into silence. What I didn't see was that after hearing my words, Shunbai's expression suddenly changed. He just quietly stared at me like that, his gaze unchanging for a long time. But I couldn't be bothered to open my eyes. I felt so tired. This mission, it has been 12 years. I'm too exhausted. Let everything come to an end. Quickly. 12 years ago, I took on this mission for the first time. The mission difficulty level was very high, but the system told me I could study the medical major I had always dreamed of in this world. The words of rejection were on the tip of my tongue, but instead changed to agreement. That year, when I applied for university, I missed the score cutoff by just 1 point and was reassigned to another major. Studying medicine was always my dream, the biggest regret of my life. Thus, when I arrived at that high school and saw Shunbai for the first time, I couldn't have been happier. Let's study together and get into a good university, how about that? He looked at this new transfer student, clearly surprised. You don't hate me? Shunbai was often bullied by the delinquents in his class during high school. Because he excelled in his studies, came from a poor family, and was an honest person, those delinquents targeted him. They spread rumors, slandered him, played pranks. Soon, the whole class hated him. Except Xiaoyu, who occasionally was willing to say a few words to him. I smiled and kicked away the trash those delinquents had placed on his desk. What are you afraid of? I'm here to help you. Do you believe me? I'm a celestial being. With me here, no one will dare to bully you anymore. I used my privileges as a time traveler and applied to the system to lift Shunbai's misfortunes. He's a smart guy. Once he noticed these changes, he naturally figured out that I was the reason behind them. He began to depend on me. During that time, Xiaoyu also frequently looked for him to chat, but he always put me first. Every time, he would gaze gently into my eyes and then solemnly tell her, I'm going to get into the same university as Sui. I want to be with her forever. Back then, I proudly showed off to the system about it. Just this, and it's extremely difficult? System, I am really amazing. In my opinion, the second male lead had already given up on the female lead and fallen in love with me. I completed the task and got into the medical program I had always dreamed of. No one is happier than I am. So I bared my heart, giving all the deepest feelings I had to Shunbai. I've always wanted to thank him, as I feel he's the one who brought all this to me. He gave me the opportunity to realize my dream and provided me with unconditional companionship and love. At that time, I longed for a future with him so much that I would regularly arrange the photos of my favorite ring styles and set them as his phone screensaver, hoping he would propose to me. But the first iteration abruptly ended with his death while saving Xiaoyu. I couldn't accept it. I couldn't handle it. That's why, when the task failed, I kept starting new iterations over and over again. But the time span was too long, a full 12 years, and I've lost track of whether this is love or just an obsession. In this life, I actually gave up my dream of becoming a doctor for him just to tell him that I love him. I want to ask him and also admit that he loves me. Like that high school evening self-study session with beautiful sunsets, openly and brightly becoming adults. He wants to attend the same university as me. He wants to be with me forever. He loves me, but I didn't achieve that. System, I apologize for my previous rashness. I chuckled. As expected, the difficulty is very high. I won't take this task. The vow to be together forever, since he broke it first, I'll be the one to end it. This way, it gives an explanation to my 12 years. I lay in the hospital for a whole day. On the morning of the day I was discharged, my neck was wrapped in thick bandages, and Shunbai came to pick me up. His tone carried a hint of caution. Honey, let's go home. The doctor checked. Xiaoyu is actually fine, but you are much more seriously injured. I know you blame me for not protecting you right away. When we get home, let me apologize, okay? I have reflected on myself, and I've asked Xiaoyu to move out. I looked at him with some surprise. Xiaoyu actually moved out? Was he really willing to let Xiaoyu move out? Perhaps my gaze was too direct. Shunbai blushed and quickly started to speak. Actually, I went back that day to check the surveillance footage. Xiaoyu tried to delete it, but I got to it before her and saw that she intentionally stabbed you. Really, I've already contacted the moving company. Her things will no longer appear in our home. From now on, let's live our lives well, okay? The more Shunbai spoke, the more urgent he became, and by the end, his eyes were red and his tone nearly pleading. At the same time, the cold mechanical voice sounded again. Attention, host, world detachment will occur in 1 hour. Please confirm again, host, if you wish to forego starting the 4th cycle and not change the 2nd male law. Adds fate of dying in 1 hour. I was silent for a moment, holding Shunbai's hand. Okay. This was in response to Shunbai's invitation, and also an answer to the system. Shunbai. Soon it will be gone forever. 10 days of leisure time and a whole day wasted at the hospital. I followed Shunbai back home. Sure enough, I saw the moving company at the door with lots of things placed outside. And Xiaoyu, heavily pregnant, was sitting on the steps at the door. As soon as she saw us, she rushed over. Brother Shunbai, I was wrong. I really was wrong. Please don't drive me away. I have nowhere to live. I'll die out there. She cried tearfully, evoking sympathy. I am a pregnant woman. Brother Shunbai, didn't you say you would take care of Yaya for a lifetime? Didn't you say that once the child is born, you would treat it as your own? Don't these words count anymore? I stood by with arms crossed, watching her performance. What she said should be true. Shunbai indeed made those promises to her. But he is the kind of person who never keeps his promises. In every previous cycle, he promised to treat me well for a lifetime, none of which he ever fulfilled. I'm used to it. I just find it disgusting. You should leave. Shunbai said coldly, not wanting to look at her any longer. But Xiaoyu suddenly fell to the ground, clutching tightly to his leg. As the two continued their entanglement, Shunbai looked at me with a gloomy expression. Honey, you go inside first. I'll have her leave right away, don't worry. Frankly, I didn't want to concern myself with their affairs either. I yawned and went inside. Attention, host. Countdown. 20 minutes. Please prepare to say your final goodbyes to this world. I lounged on the sofa, staring at the empty house. With Xiaoyu's belongings gone, it was clear there wasn't much left here. My things had long been collected by someone I arranged. Do you really need me to say it to your face? Xiaoyu, haven't you caused enough trouble? Yesterday at the hospital, I saw the messages on your phone. Chunze has already promised to take responsibility for you and the child, Xiaoyu, so what do you take me for? It was a complete mess outside. So that's how it is. In every cycle, the male and female leads always end up together naturally, but it's a pity for the second male lead, who always becomes a scapegoat, dying for the female lead. In this cycle, despite some twists and turns in the process, the male and female leads reconciled in the end. I wonder if it's the will of heaven. I felt like laughing, but I didn't know if I was laughing at myself or at Shunbai. He, like me, gave everything but gained nothing. Serves him right. But as I laughed, I suddenly realized that it had been quiet outside for quite some time. When I looked up again, Shunbai was Aura. Audi inside the house. His face was deathly pale. He was looking around at everything. In the past, Xiaoyu had set up many things in the house, but now that everything was moved out, he finally noticed. The house was almost empty. There was nothing of mine left. Wife, he stammered, where are your things? I responded casually. Don't want them. Trash, I don't want any of it. His face turned even worse. He swallowed. It's okay, wife, if you don't want them, then of course we'll throw them away. When we have money in the future, we'll buy new ones, better ones. I quietly watched him. System notification. Countdown 10 minutes. Shunbai suddenly seemed to panic all of a sudden. Like performing a magic trick, he pulled out a small box from behind his back. He opened it, and inside lay a beautiful ring. Wife, look, he said, cold sweat streaming down his face. I bought this for you. Originally, I thought I'd wait until this busy period was over to propose to you. But he gave a bitter smile. There have been too many misunderstandings between us. Wife, will you marry me? He hurriedly lifted my hand, and before I could even answer, he was already trying to slide the ring onto my finger. Countdown, 9 minutes. Shunbai's hand suddenly trembled. The ring fell to the floor, and as he bent down to pick it up, he knocked his head on the coffee table. Finally retrieving it, he used his trembling hands to place the ring on my finger. Wife, do you like it? He looked at me with eyes filled with hope. Countdown, 8 minutes. His body froze again. Wife, he almost shouted, and tears suddenly streamed down his face at that moment. I'm sorry, I know I've done a lot of terrible things, I'm sorry, wife. Wife, we'll have a future. We'll start over, won't we? Countdown, 7 minutes. During this time, I kept quietly watching him. He seemed more panicked with every system announcement. I continued to smile, without saying a word. And now, I suddenly want to ask a question. Shunbai. I stroked the ring on my hand and smiled. It's impressive you still remember the style I like. This ring was the wallpaper I set on his phone during my first run. So, he actually always remembered. And he can hear it. Countdown, 6 minutes. I reached to touch Shunbai's face. Do you regret it? You've died twice for her, and now you're about to die a third time. Actually, during the first run, the police were about to arrive. If you had chosen to save me first, that guide's knife wouldn't have stabbed straight into your heart. In the second timeline, if you hadn't argued with me and hadn't been drinking, you wouldn't have gotten into that car accident. Shunbai, have you never regretted it? His face grew increasingly pale, but he didn't deny it, nor did he ask any questions. He remembered everything from these 3 timelines, yet he would rather continue treating me like a clown, toying with me. 5 minutes remaining. Honey, listen to me. He gripped my hand tightly, so hard it hurt. This is the last time, honey. His tears fell one by one. Back in high school, I was bullied, and only Xiaoyu stood up for me. When I was beaten in the restroom, she was the one who told the teacher. 3 times in 3 years, she saved me. Until you appeared. So, his hands trembled violently again. Through all these years, my feelings for her weren't fake. But now, I just want to repay her for saving me those 3 times. There's no future between her and me anymore. 4 minutes remaining. I let out a laugh, bewildered and bitter. Recalling the time when I used the privileges of a transmigrator to alter Shinbai's fate of being bullied, the system penalized me severely. The mission hadn't even succeeded, and I was already resorting to using privileges. There is a price to pay for doing this. The price was that after I succeeded in the mission, I would receive no reward. But it no longer mattered to me, as being able to study the medicine I wanted in this world was already the best reward. I loved Shinbai deeply. I once had it all. Yet dreams always come to an end. No matter how long you've been immersed in them, once the dream is over, you shouldn't linger. 3 minutes countdown, please pay attention, host. I gently took the ring off my ring finger and placed it back in the box. Shunbai, when I asked if you regretted it, in fact, I wanted to tell you I don't regret it. Now, hoping for your death is also true. Suddenly, Shunbai embraced me tightly.
No. No.
Darling, don't leave me. We can have a 4th run, darling. You were just lying to me, weren't you? We'll have a future, won't we? He held me too tightly. Scalding tears fall on my shoulder. The system's halo has appeared, descending upon me. He stared at me in a daze. Countdown 2 minutes. Error. Error. System prompt. Host's mission successful. The second male lead will no longer die for the heroine. Congratulations, host. You are the only one to complete the task in the last 2 minutes before the time runs out, and you now have the repeated opportunity to confirm detachment, along with the reward mechanism. Your use of the traveler privilege during this strategy will come at no cost. A bug appeared in the mission. When the world restarted, the second male lead seemed to retain memories. Thank you for your report. The system will rectify it. Countdown 1 minute. Do you confirm detachment from the world? I smiled and answered without hesitation. Confirm. Shunbai had completely lost his voice. His hands kept grasping, but the halo of crossing already blocked him. He suddenly fell to the G. Round, curling up in a pitiful state. The halo blocked everything, even sound. I could only see his devastated expression and lip movement. It should be, "Don't leave me. I beg you, my wife. Don't leave me." System confirmed. Host number 4572 has completed the task and is ready to disconnect. The world has been frozen. Congratulations to the host for completing an extremely difficult strategy task. We look forward to your next journey. System number 3 is pleased to continue serving you. All the worlds disappeared. The only thing before my eyes was the passage I had entered through. If I walk forward, I can return to my real home. I'll have to keep dealing with a major I dislike, doing a job I don't enjoy, and being pressured by my parents to go on blind dates. But suddenly, I figured something out. When I studied medicine, I also found that many things were different from what I had imagined. The university I idealized also turned out to have hidden rules in its policies. The man I thought I loved deeply was, in fact, just good at acting. I used to think I had gained everything, but looking back now, maybe my reality isn't so bad after all. People always like to romanticize the paths they haven't taken. Little do they realize that their own path still has many flowers they haven't noticed. It's just a pity that Shunbai, at the last second, inexplicably changed his mind and withdrew his affection from the heroine. He didn't end up dying. However, it no longer has anything to do with me.